June 6, 1944. The scent of lilacs and decay hung heavy in the air of the abandoned chateau. It was a cloying, sweet smell, out of place amidst the dust-sheeted furniture and the shattered portrait of a forgotten French aristocrat. Captain John Miller, of the Office of Strategic Services, stood in the grand foyer, not looking at the broken finery. His focus was on the small, elegant object in his gloved hand, a baccarat crystal perfume bottle, its facets catching the faint light from a boarded-up window. It had been found hidden in a floor safe, behind a loose stone. It was the reason his team was here, weeks after D-Day, in a supposedly cleared sector of the French countryside. The mission was codenamed Operation Scent of Treason. The local resistance leader, a grim-faced woman named Elise, had provided the tip. The Germans were not just soldiers here, she had said, her voice low. There was a man, a scientist, Dr. Vogel. He was not with the military. He was with the Arne-Erbe, the Nazi occult research branch. He was obsessed with scents, with pheromones. He believed he could create a perfume that would inspire fear or loyalty. He called it his weapon of the soul. He left in a hurry, but he left something behind. He called it his masterpiece. Miller held the masterpiece. It was filled with a pale amber liquid. The bottle was sealed with a delicate gold cap. It looked innocent, beautiful, but as he turned it, he saw the tiny, almost imperceptible markings etched into the base of the crystal. Not a manufacturer's stamp, a series of alphanumeric codes, and a symbol, a small, stylized OSS. This was not a Nazi weapon. This was one of theirs. His radio operator, a young man named Carter, approached, his face pale. "Sir, we've swept the basement. You need to see this." The basement was not a wine cellar. It was a laboratory. Beakers and distillation apparatus stood on tables. But in the corner, behind a heavy curtain, was a different kind of setup. A small, airtight chamber, large enough for a single person. The glass door was splintered from the inside. On the floor of the chamber lay a German officer, his body contorted in a final, agonized spasm. His skin was a strange, bluish hue. His eyes were wide open, frozen in a look of utter terror. There was no blood, no visible wound, and clutched in his stiffened hand was a matching gold cap for a perfume bottle. Miller's mind raced, connecting the horrifying dots. This was not a resistance story. This was an OSS operation, a black operation so secret that his own unit, tasked with investigating strange Nazi artifacts, had never been briefed. They had stumbled into the aftermath of their own side's classified mission. "Get a chemical warfare specialist in here now," Miller ordered, his voice tight. "And I want a full signal to London. Highest encryption. Query for any operation, any file, related to perfumery or olfactory weapons." The response from London was not what he expected. It was not a confirmation. It was a denial and a warning. "No such operation authorized. Cease all inquiry immediately. Return to primary objective. Acknowledge." But Miller could not cease. The dead man in the chamber was a Hauptmann, a captain. In his pocket they found a love letter, a photograph of a woman, and a small, leather-bound diary. The entries were mostly mundane, until the final one. "A gift from the traitor Fournier, a peace offering," he says. "A legendary perfume, Soufflé de la Reine, the breath of the Queen. For my wife," he says. "For my loyalty to the new France. I am not a fool. I know it is a bribe, but the bottle, it is exquisite. I will keep it. A trophy. Perhaps I will even wear a drop. What power can a scent hold?" Vogel would be fascinated. The traitor, Fournier, a name they knew, a French industrialist who had collaborated heavily with the Nazis. He had fled Paris just ahead of the liberation. The pieces were forming a terrifying picture. The OSS had somehow used a French collaborator to deliver a poisoned gift to a high-ranking German officer. A gift disguised as a rare perfume. But something had gone wrong. The officer had apparently tested it on himself in this makeshift laboratory chamber, and it had killed him in seconds. The chemical specialist arrived. His analysis was swift and chilling. He took one whiff of the air near the chamber with a specialized detector and recoiled. "Captain, this is not a conventional agent. I'm reading traces of a compound. It's an organophosphate, but highly refined. A nerve agent. A single droplet on the skin would be enough, inhaled as a vapor. Death would be instantaneous. It has no smell. The lilac scent is a mask, a carrier." Miller looked at the beautiful bottle in his hand. It was a bomb. A silent, invisible delivery system for one of the deadliest substances on Earth, designed to be opened by a specific target. A wife? A mistress? The target was unclear, but the intent was not. This was assassination, a level of deniable psychological warfare that was beyond anything he had encountered. His team was now trapped in a web of lies. Their own government was denying the operation. A Nazi scientist was involved in something far beyond pheromones. A French collaborator was a pawn in a deadly game. And a German officer was dead, killed by an American weapon. That night, as they secured the chateau, a shot rang out. It was Carter, the radio operator. He was found at his post, his throat slit. The radio was smashed, their encrypted codes were gone. And on the table next to him, placed with deliberate care, was a single white lily, a calling card. They were not alone. Someone else knew about the perfume bottle, someone who did not want the truth to get out. And they had just declared war on Miller's investigation. The mission was no longer about understanding a strange Nazi weapon. It was about surviving the fallout of a secret their own side wanted buried. The perfume bottle was the key, and it was currently in the pocket of Captain John Miller, a target now for forces both seen and unseen. The psychological tension was a wire, stretched taut. Every shadow held a threat. Every scent on the wind could be a prelude to a silent, scentless death. June 7th, 1944. The silence in the chateau was heavier than before. It was a watchful silence, broken only by the whisper of the night wind through broken panes and the frantic beating of Captain Miller's own heart. Carter was dead. The radio was dead. They were cut off, trapped in a beautiful tomb with a weapon in their pocket, and a phantom enemy who left lilies as a calling card. Miller looked at the delicate flower on the radio table. It was not just a message. It was a mockery, a symbol of purity left in a place of brutal murder. Sergeant Dixon, his face a mask of grim fury, finished checking the perimeter. "No sign of entry, Captain. No tracks. It's like he was a ghost." He knelt by Carter's body. "Professional job. Very clean." They knew what they were doing. Miller's mind raced. The OSS had denied the operation, yet someone with high-level skill and intelligence was hunting them. A rival agency? A Nazi cleanup crew? The possibilities were all bad. He pulled the perfume bottle from his pocket. It felt impossibly heavy, a crystalline anchor dragging him into the depths of a conspiracy he was never meant to see. "We can't stay here," Miller said, his voice low. "They know our location. We're compromised. Our new objective is to evac with this," he held up the bottle, "and find out who they are." "And go where, sir?" One of the other men, a private named O'Malley, asked. "London just told us to stand down." "London is lying to us," Miller stated flatly. The words felt treasonous, but the evidence was irrefutable. "We're not going to London. We're going to find Fournier, the collaborator. He's the only link we have. He gave this bottle to the German. He knows who he was working for." Using a detailed map of the region they found in the chateau's library, they identified Fournier's primary estate. It was a 30-mile journey through contested territory. They moved out under the cover of a damp, misty dawn, leaving Carter's body covered respectfully in the cellar. They were no longer a standard investigation unit. They were fugitives, operating in the blind. The journey was a nerve-shredding exercise in paranoia. Every rustle in the hedgerows was an assassin. Every distant vehicle was a threat. The psychological tension was a physical weight on their shoulders. Miller clutched the perfume bottle in a padded pouch inside his jacket. It was their only bargaining chip, their only piece of the truth, and a potential death sentence for all of them. They reached Fournier's estate by nightfall. It was a sprawling modern property, now showing signs of hasty abandonment. Trash was scattered across the lawn. A luxury automobile sat with its doors open, empty. The house itself had been looted, its finery torn apart by either retreating Germans or advancing locals. But in the study, they found a secret. Behind a false bookshelf, triggered by pulling a specific volume on winemaking, was a wall safe. It was already open, empty, except for a single piece of microfilm, discarded on the floor as if unimportant. Using a magnifying glass from the desk, Miller held it up to the fading light from the window. It was not military plans, it was a chemical formula, complex, dense, with molecular diagrams. And at the top, a title, Project Liliac, Phase 3 Final Synthesis. Compound VX1. Volatility and olfactory masking parameters. This was it. The science behind the perfume. The OSS hadn't just used a poison. They had engineered a new one. A nerve agent designed to be delivered as a fragrance. The sheer, chilling elegance of it was monstrous. "Sir," Dixon called from the doorway, his voice tight. "We've got company." A car. Black sedan. No markings. Miller's blood went cold. They had been followed. He pocketed the microfilm. Back door, now. They slipped out through the kitchen and into the dense woods that bordered the property. From their cover, they watched as two men in dark civilian suits emerged from the sedan. They moved with a confident, predatory grace. They entered the house. They were not soldiers. They were hunters. "OSS," Dixon muttered. "Clean up crew." The men emerged minutes later, empty-handed. They spoke briefly into a handheld radio. Then they got back in their car and drove away, their mission apparently incomplete. They had come for the microfilm, or for the perfume, or for them. Now Miller and his team were truly in the wilderness, hunted by their own side, possessing a weapon of mass assassination and the formula to create it. The unanswered mysteries were multiplying. Who was the intended target of the perfume? Why was the OSS willing to kill its own to bury this? And what was Dr. Vogel's real role in all of this? The mission was no longer about completing an objective. It was about survival and exposing a truth so dark it had to be concealed with blood. The perfume bottle was no longer just evidence. It was a key to a door behind which lay a terrible, hidden war within the war, and Captain Miller had just turned the lock. June 9th, 1944. The air in the laboratory was thick with the scent of chemicals and imminent death. Captain Miller stood with his back to a table littered with perfume bottles, his Thompson submachine gun pointed at the OSS. Operative. Sergeant Dixon and Private O'Malley flanked him, their own weapons trained on the SS guards. Obergruppenführer Graf watched with cold amusement, while Dr. Vogel seemed to shrink into his lab coat, a terrified spectator to his own demise. "A regrettable conclusion," the OSS man said, his voice calm. His finger tightened on the trigger of his suppressed pistol. "You should have followed orders, Captain." In that frozen second, Miller's mind raced. They were outnumbered. A firefight would be a suicide. His eyes darted to the table, the perfume bottles, the weapon itself. With a sudden, desperate move, he swept his arm across the table, sending a dozen crystal bottles crashing to the stone floor. A wave of cloying, floral scent filled the air, overwhelming the chemical smell. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the two SS guards, who had been standing closest to the shattered glass, began to choke. Their hands flew to their throats. Their eyes bulged. They collapsed, their bodies seizing, a hideous paralysis locking their muscles. The nerve agent, aerosolized by the impact, was doing its work. The OSS man stared in shock, his clinical demeanor shattered. He stumbled backward, scrambling for a gas mask that hung on his belt. Graf, his face a mask of fury, drew his Luger. "Now!" Miller yelled. Dixon didn't need to be told twice. He fired a burst from his Thompson, not at Graf, but at the overhead electrical conduits power the mercury vapor lights. Sparks showered down like angry rain, plunging the hallway into near darkness, the emergency lights casting frantic, strobing shadows. In the chaos, Miller grabbed Dr. Vogel by the collar. "You're coming with us." They ran, stumbling through the disorienting gloom. The screams from the bunkers seemed louder now, more frantic. They burst out of the service entrance and into the fog-shrouded night. Alarms began to wail across the compound. "The bunkers!" O'Malley shouted over the din. "We can't leave them." Miller looked at the low, concrete structures, the source of the endless screaming. He knew what they were, human laboratories, but they had no time, no means to free anyone. "We can't," Miller yelled back, the guilt of physical pain. "Our mission is the evidence. It's the only thing that can stop this." They fled into the woods, dragging a terrified and protesting Dr. Vogel with them. The sounds of pursuit, shouts in German and English, the barking of dogs echoed behind them. They had ignited a hornet's nest. They found refuge in a dank, limestone cave a mile up the coast. The roar of the channel waves masked their sounds. Inside, by the light of a single shielded flashlight, they confronted their prisoner. "Talk," Miller demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "What is your part in this?" The truth. Dr. Vogel, shivering and defeated, slumped against the cave wall. "They approached me, the Americans, through Graf. They had the compound, WWII, a marvel of biochemical engineering, but it was crude, a blunt instrument. My life's work has been the delivery system, the carrier scent. It must be perfect, undetectable, alluring. I was perfecting the mask for their poison." "For the assassination of Hitler," Miller stated. Vogel nodded weakly. "Yes. A single bottle, placed in his private quarters. He was known to use cologne. It was plausible. But the sample you have, it was a test batch, unstable. The molecular bonds of the mask were breaking down, releasing the agent prematurely. That is what killed the Hauptmann, a flawed prototype. And the OSS is working with the SS to kill their own Führer?" Dixon asked, incredulous. "Graf is not loyal to Hitler," Vogel explained. "He is loyal to an idea, a Germany that survives. He believes Hitler is leading them to ruin. He and his faction within the SS want a negotiated peace with the West. Eliminating Hitler was the first step. The OSS provided the tool. It was a coup, a secret plot between a faction of American intelligence and a faction of the Nazi elite, the ultimate back-channel deal. And Miller's team had just blown it wide open. "There is more," Vogel whispered, his eyes fearful. "The OSS men. They are not just OSS. They are also with another group. I heard them speak of it. A name, Avalon." The word hit Miller like a physical blow. It was the same name from the classified files Albright had mentioned. The transnational entity, the parasite on the timeline. "What does Avalon have to do with Perfume?" Miller demanded. "Not with the perfume," Vogel said, his voice dropping even lower. "With the outcome, with the peace. Graf's faction, they are aligned with Avalon's vision for the future. A new world order. The assassination was not just to end the war. It was to position the right people in power, in both our countries. The conspiracy was deeper, wider, and more terrifying than they had ever imagined. It wasn't just about ending a war. It was about steering the peace, controlling the future. Miller pulled the microfilm from his pocket, the formula for WWII, and the perfume bottle. They were no longer just evidence of an assassination plot. They were evidence of a treasonous conspiracy that reached into the highest, most secret levels of power. The barking of dogs grew louder. Much louder. They were close. "They found us," O'Malley said, peering out of the cave entrance. They were trapped, against a cliff face, with the enemy closing in from the land. Their only escape was the cold, treacherous waters of the English Channel. Miller made a decision. He handed the microfilm and the perfume bottle to Dixon. "You and O'Malley take Vogel. Get to the water. Try to signal a patrol boat. Anything." "What about you, Captain?" Dixon asked, his face grim. "I'll hold them off," Miller said, checking the magazine on his Thompson. "I'll give you time." It was a suicide mission. They all knew it, but the evidence had to get out. The truth about Operation Lilac, about Graf, about the OSS and Avalon, had to survive. As Dixon, O'Malley, and a reluctant Vogel scrambled down the rocky slope toward the crashing waves, Miller turned to face the entrance of the cave. He could see the flicker of flashlight beams in the trees. He could hear the guttural commands in German. He took a deep breath, the scent of salt and pine filling his lungs. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a witness, and he would make his stand not for a flag, but for the truth. The first shadow appeared at the cave mouth. Miller raised his weapon. The silence of the night was shattered by the roar of gunfire. June 10th, 1944. The cave entrance erupted in a storm of muzzle flashes and screaming lead. Captain Miller fired controlled, 3-round bursts from his Thompson, the deafening roar swallowing the sounds of the channel behind him. The first 2 figures to enter the cave fell backward, their silhouettes collapsing against the grey dawn light. Return fire chipped away at the limestone around him, sharp fragments stinging his face. He was a cornered animal, but his purpose was clear. Every second he held them was a second for Dixon to get the evidence away. He could hear the shouts outside, a mix of German and American-accented English. "Flank him! Go around!" They were not just trying to kill him. They were trying to get past him. Miller dropped to one knee, firing at movement in the trees. A cry of pain answered his shots. He was buying time, but he was running out of it. The drum magazine on his Thompson was half empty. He had one spare. This would not be a long fight. A new sound joined the fray. The sharp, higher-pitched crack of a M1 Garand from the direction of the beach. Then another. Dixon and O'Malley. They hadn't fled. They had taken up a supporting position on the rocky shore, laying down covering fire against the flanks of the pursuing force. A surge of desperate hope filled Miller. He surged to his feet and charged out of the cave, firing from the hip. The surprise move caught the attackers off guard. He saw the OSS, man, the one with the sharp jaw, taking cover behind a tree, yelling into a radio. Miller sprayed the tree trunk, splintering wood, forcing the man down. "Miller, fall back!" Dixon's voice carried over the gunfire. Miller turned and ran, zigzagging down the steep, rocky slope toward the water. Bullets whined past him, kicking up spurts of dirt and stone. He felt a searing impact on his arm, a hot numbness followed by a bloom of pain. He kept running. He reached the shore. The scene was chaos. Dixon and O'Malley were pinned behind a large rock, trading fire with SS troopers working their way down the cliff path. Dr. Vogel was cowering in the water, clutching a floating piece of wreckage, his eyes wide with terror. The cold channel waves crashed around them, soaking them to the bone. "There's no boat, nothing!" O'Malley shouted, reloading his rifle. The situation was hopeless. They were trapped on a narrow strip of beach, with enemies above and the impassable sea before them. It was then that they saw it, a shape emerging from the thick sea fog, low, grey and silent, a boat, but not a patrol boat. It was a German E-boat, a fast attack craft, its deck gun trained on the beach. This was it. The end. But the deck gun did not fire. Instead, a figure appeared at the railing, holding a loudspeaker. The voice that boomed across the water was not German. It was American, and it was familiar. "Captain Miller, hold your fire. This is Albright. Hold your fire and prepare to be extracted." Miller stared, disbelief warring with a deep, instinctual distrust. "Mr. Albright." The OSS man from London who had first warned him off. The man whose organisation was trying to kill him. On the cliff above, the shooting had stopped. The OSS and SS forces were also staring at the E-boat, confused by this new variable. "What is this, Albright?" Miller yelled back, his voice raw. "A change of management, Captain," Albright replied, his voice crisp and clear. "The faction you stumbled upon has been purged. Their operation was unauthorized. We are here to clean up their mess and to retrieve our asset, his asset. Dr. Vogel. Or the Perfume." Miller couldn't tell. "Why should I trust you?" Miller shouted. "Your people just tried to kill us." "Because you have two choices, Captain." Albright's voice held no room for negotiation. You can die on this beach, and your story dies with you. Or you can get on this boat, and you can help me burn the whole rotten tree down. The choice is yours." Miller looked at Dixon and O'Malley. Their faces were pale, exhausted. They looked to him. He looked at the microfilm in Dixon's hand, and the perfume bottle tucked in his own jacket. If they died here, the truth died. If they got on the boat, they were placing themselves in the hands of the very shadow world they were fighting against. It was a pact with the devil, but it was the only chance for the truth to see the light. "Cease fire!" Miller commanded. He stood up, his hands in the air. Dixon and O'Malley, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. The E-boat launched a rubber dinghy. As it motored towards shore, Miller saw the OSS and SS forces on the cliff reluctantly withdrawing, melting back into the trees. They were yielding to a higher authority. They boarded the E-boat. It was spotless, crewed by men in unmarked naval uniforms. Albright stood on the deck, as impeccably dressed as ever. He looked at the blood soaking Miller's sleeve. "Medic will see to that, Captain." His eyes then fell on Dr. Vogel, who was shivering on the deck. "Ah, Doctor, your expertise is required elsewhere." He gestured, and two crewmen led the terrified scientist below. Finally, Albright's gaze landed on Miller. The sample, and the formula. Miller slowly reached into his jacket and handed over the perfume bottle. Dixon gave him the microfilm. Albright pocketed them without a second glance. "You have caused a great deal of trouble, Captain. But you have also exposed a cancer within our own organization, an alliance with elements of the SS, orchestrated by the Avalon Group. For that, you have my gratitude." "What happens now?" Miller asked, his voice flat. "Now?" Albright said, turning to look at the receding French coast. "Now the war continues, but a different war, the one you have just enlisted in. The war against Avalon. Your unit no longer exists. Your records are being expunged. You will be assigned to a new command, a deniable command." He turned back, his eyes cold and serious. "The story of the perfume bottle will never be told. It is too dangerous. The public can never know that their government engineered a perfumed poison, or that it conspired with the SS. But you know, and that knowledge makes you a weapon. The question is, will you be our weapon?" The E-boat ploughed through the waves, heading away from the war they knew, and into the heart of the secret one. Miller looked at his men, then at the churning water. They had survived, but they had lost their past. Their future was a ghost. They had the truth, but they could never speak it. They were soldiers without a country, fighting a war without end.